Miami looks like an American success story. Glass towers, billion-dollar condos, supercars lining Ocean Drive, banks, hedge funds, crypto startups, and luxury real estate as far as the eye can see. But here's the uncomfortable question no one asks. What if modern Miami wasn't built by American money at all? What if its explosive its skyline, its banking system, its real estate boom was quietly fueled by something else? Something foreign, something dirty, something soaked in oil. Because long before Miami became the playground of billionaires and influencers, it was the final destination of one of the largest capital migrations in modern history, and it all began with two words whispered in private offices, airport lounges, and offshore banks. Dame Dos, give me two passports, 2 bank accounts, 2 lives. This is the hidden story of how Venezuelan oil money, legal, illegal, and everything in between helped build modern Miami. To understand Miami, you have to start hundreds of miles south in Venezuela. For most of the 20th century, Venezuela wasn't a poor country. It was one of the richest nations in Latin America. By the 1950s, Venezuela had the largest proven oil reserves in the world, a currency stronger than many European nations, a middle class that flew to Miami for shopping weekends. Oil dollars poured into the country through a state-controlled system that created a powerful elite, politicians, generals, bankers, oil executives, and connected families. And here's the key. From the very beginning, Venezuelan wealth was designed to escape. The elite never trusted their own system. So while oil money entered Venezuela, it never stayed there. It flowed outward into Swiss banks, Panamanian shell companies, and eventually, Miami. Miami wasn't chosen by accident. It offered 3 things Venezuelan elites desperately wanted. 1. Proximity, a short flight from Caracas. 2. U.S. legal protection, strong property rights. 3. Financial secrecy, especially in real estate. By the 1960s and 70s, Miami was already becoming a financial backdoor for Latin American capital. The Venezuelan oil wealth accelerated everything. Money arrived in waves. Quietly through U.S. banks, loudly through luxury condos, invisibly through shell companies. Entire neighborhoods began transforming not because of local demand, but because foreign money needed somewhere safe to hide. Miami didn't just grow, it absorbed. Here's how the system worked. Oil revenues entered Venezuela through the state. From there, contracts were inflated, kickbacks were paid, dollars were extracted. Those dollars then traveled through offshore tax havens, Miami-based banks. Real estate purchases with no income verification. Condos weren't homes, they were vaults. A $5 million apartment wasn't about living it was about parking wealth outside Venezuela. And this is where the phrase Dame Dos becomes critical. Dame Dos wasn't slang, it was strategy. Venezuelan elites wanted 1 foot in Venezuela: power, contracts, influence. 1 foot in the US: safety, assets, escape to passports. 2 identities, 2 systems. Miami became the physical embodiment of that strategy. Bankers, lawyers, and developers in South Florida learned quickly. If you made it easy for Venezuelan money to enter, it would never stop coming. By the 1980s and 90s, Miami's growth began decoupling from the American economy. While other U.S. cities rose and fell with domestic cycles, Miami surged even during downturns. What? Because Venezuelan oil money didn't care about interest rates, local wages, rental demand. It cared about escape velocity. Developers figured this out. They didn't market condos as homes, they marketed them as safe assets, US dollar protection, political insurance. Entire towers were sold before construction, often to buyers who never intended to live there. This system didn't run itself. It required American bankers willing to look away, lawyers skilled in anonymity, real estate brokers fluent in discretion, no single villain, just incentives. Miami became one of the easiest places on earth to move large sums of money into physical assets, no questions asked. And Venezuelan elites noticed. Then came the late 1990s. Venezuela's political stability began to crack. Corruption exploded. Oil revenues became more centralized. Institutions weakened. And in 1999, everything changed. Hugo Chavez rose to power. For the elite, this was the signal, not to fix Venezuela, but to leave it. What had been steady capital leakage turned into a financial evacuation. Oil money fled Venezuela at historic speed. Miami absorbed it. Prices soared. Construction exploded. Banks expanded. The skyline you recognize today, much of it was funded during this period. But this is where the story turns darker. Because when capital leaves a country en masse, it doesn't just build another city, it destroys the one it leaves behind. By the early 2000s, Venezuelan capital flight was no longer a contingency plan. It was the plan. Hugo Chavez didn't just change leadership, he changed incentives. Oil revenues became more centralized. Institutions became politicized. Property rights became uncertain. And uncertainty's the one thing capital will always run from. The wealthy didn't debate whether to leave Venezuela. They debated how fast and how much. And Miami was ready. Here's what made this wave different from earlier ones. This wasn't just corruption money. This was fear money. Executives feared nationalization. Officials feared political purges. Business owners feared asset seizures. So, the money moved faster, bigger checks, bigger condos, bigger towers. Miami real estate became a panic button. When money leaves a country, it doesn't leave quietly. It takes investment, productivity, stability, currency confidence. Venezuela's oil income should have been enough to modernize the country. Instead, infrastructure collapsed. Imports replaced local production. Inflation spiraled. Why? Because the elite had already opted out. They didn't need a functioning Venezuela anymore. Their wealth lived in Miami. This created a deadly cycle. 1. Political instability increased. 2. Capital fled the country. 3. Economic conditions worsened. 4. More instability followed. 5. Even more capital escaped. Each dollar that left Venezuela strengthened Miami, weakened Caracas. Two cities tied together by money but moving in opposite directions. From Miami's perspective, this looked like success. New towers, new banks, new luxury brands. But beneath the surface, Miami developed a dangerous dependency. Not on productivity, not on innovation, but on foreign crises. Miami learned that. When Latin America burned, Miami boomed. When governments failed, condos sold faster. This is not a healthy economic foundation. It's an addiction. The global financial crisis should have ended this model. Instead, it exposed how fragile it was. When a credit froze, construction stalled. Prices collapsed, empty luxury units multiplied. And yet, Miami recovered faster than most cities. Why? Because foreign capital returned the moment panic eased. The lesson Miami learned was dangerous. The money always comes back. But here's the twist few expected. The Dame DOS strategized to countries. Two systems began breaking down. What? Because Venezuela didn't stabilize. It collapsed. Hyperinflation, currency destruction, mass migration. At that point, Dame DOS became meaningless. There was no longer a first life to balance the second. Miami wasn't the backup anymore. It was the only option. Miami didn't just inherit money, it inherited consequences. Empty luxury towers owned by absentee investors. Housing unaffordable for locals. A city optimized for storage, not living condos sat dark at night. Not because no one could afford them, but because they were never meant to be lived in. They were balance sheets in concrete form. Eventually US regulators noticed. Policies were introduced. Anti-money laundering checks, ownership disclosure requirements, increased scrutiny of cash purchases, but the damage was already done. Capital had reshaped Miami's DNA, and money is always faster than regulation. Here's the uncomfortable truth. This story didn't end with Venezuela. The same pattern is repeating today with different countries. Money fleeing, political instability, currency debasement, debt crises flows into Miami, London, Dubai, New York. The labels change. The mechanism doesn't. Across global cities, luxury vacancy rates remain high, prices disconnect from local incomes. Real estate acts as a financial instrument, not shelter. What you're seeing isn't growth, it's capital migration, and it always leaves devastation behind. Here's the rule history keeps proving. When elites extract wealth instead of investing it, countries hollow out. When cities depend on crisis capital, they become fragile. The winners look strong until the flow stops. 3 clear takeaways. Takeaway number 1. Miami wasn't built by productivity alone, it was built by fleeing capital. Takeaway number 2. The Dame DOS strategy protects individuals, not nations. Takeaway number 3. When money escapes accountability, it reshapes cities and destroys countries. If Miami rose on the collapse of Venezuela, what happens when the next source of capital fails? And what city is being quietly built right now by the collapse of another nation? If you want more deep investigations into hidden financial systems, Capital Flight, the real forces shaping global cities, then subscribe, because the most important stories aren't the ones on the surface. They're the ones hidden in plain sight, written in glass, steel, and money.